This podcast is brought to you by Best at Sea Tours and by Sheets.com, who remind you that a great night's sleep begins with a great set of sheets. And here now is Tom Drake, the guru of the seas, with his special guest, Dr. David Bradley.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Guru Learns. This is where I, instead of talking to myself or to a wall during my daily cruise and travel news podcast, I talk to people that are very interesting with very, very interesting lives. And I'm so honored, actually, this gentleman agreed to talk to me today. His name is David Bradley, Dr. David Bradley. And he's historic. He's historic in that he was part of the IBM team back in the 70s that developed the first, he'll correct me if I get it wrong, but really the first IBM PC. He went on to do a lot more with IBM too, but I won't give away the big hook in this. I'll welcome David to the program. Mr. Bradley, thank you for taking the time. I appreciate that.
Tom, it's my pleasure, but I'm not quite as old as you portrayed me. I started working on the IBM PC in September of 1980.
Well, see now, this is, our friend Chat GPT. I'm looking at it right here, and it said American computer engineer who worked in IBM in the late 1970s and early 1980s. So that's kind of the same time frame there. So
you could make an argument that I worked on the precursor to the IBM PC in the late 70s. It's a product no one has ever heard of, the IBM System 23 Data Master. It was a modest commercial success, but it's how we learned how to make a personal computer.
It's so funny. When my first computer, someone lent it to me, and I did a laptop, and I didn't know anything about it. I still don't. I'm so much depending on whatever's installed in there. But being able to actually think about how this, I can't read instructions very well. And the people that write those instructions have to be so much smarter than me because they actually write. So you went to school. We'll start from there. All right. Let me give away the secret. I don't want to lose anybody. You're part of this team and you're building this new computer. And am I correct? You wanted something actually that could just refresh it and start it again without a long process. Is that right?
Yes. It was brand new hardware design, and all the software for it is brand new. And remarkably, everything doesn't work exactly right the first time. So you have to spend a lot of time debugging the system, figuring out how to fix the problems that you've already built in. And the IBM PC had been designed to test itself every time you turned it on. So as you're trying to debug, frequently you'd have to turn the machine off, wait a long time for the power supply to quiesce, turn it back on, and wait for it to go through this long test. So I decided, let's just put in a reset button. We didn't have one on the computer itself, so picked 3 keys, very unlikely to hit them by accident. Control, Alt, and Delete. And if you hit that sequence of 3 keys, the system would reboot itself. It would skip the long power on self-test. And so we could get back to debugging very quickly.
So anybody listening to this podcast, just mark this. You're actually listening to the person. And the way you just described it, though, they are three buttons or 3 whatever. They're far enough away that you're not going to hit it by mistake and then restart it and refresh it when you're in the middle of doing something. So you look down, I'm looking at my computer now, and you look down and you said, we'll do Control and then Alt and then Delete. And now the team you were with, did they ever offer another suggestion? How about Control Alt Plus or Control? No, that was it. Once you spoke, that it was decided?
Well, first of all, the keyboard that you were looking at right now,
not the same one,
is not the keyboard on the original PC. It was very different. You need to go look at pictures of that. It did not have function excuse me, it did not have function keys across the top. It had 10 function keys over on the left-hand side of the keyboard.
Okay.
But most importantly, there was only a single control key and a single alt key on the left side of the keyboard and a single delete key all the way over on the right-hand side of the keyboard.
Okay.
So it was much more difficult to hit that by mistake unless you sat on the keyboard.
Now, now how does that work? That's programming into the computer that if the computer knows when those three buttons are hit, what to do, right? Am I right?
Well, my job on the personal computer was to write the software that actually controlled all the physical hardware. Microsoft supplied the basic interpreter and the operating system, but Bill Gates and company said, we don't want to know how the hardware actually works. What we want is to have an interface where we say, tell me what key just got hit. And so my job was to provide that interface.
Right.
And I'm not going to go into all the details of how the keyboard worked, but I had to keep track of which shift key was currently pressed, which key had been pressed, whether you had held it down for a long time or not, all those sorts of things. So consequently, I already knew if the control key had been pressed, if the alt key it was currently pressed. And now if this was a delete key, okay, I'll just reset the computer. And that was simply performed by jumping to the reset location, which is where the computer went when you first started it up. So it was just a simple matter of programming.
And all you really bright guys, they always say it's simple. But now, how does this, you went to school, and again, help me out. It was Purdue, before that, Ohio, right? Dayton?
Yeah, I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. I got my undergraduate degree from the University of Dayton. Then I went to Purdue for another 4 years. And my PhD dissertation was on computer architecture, the way you could put together a set of microprocessors to do some nifty things. Of course, you look back at it now and you say, oh, isn't that sweet? Isn't that cute?
Well, now, so you went to school, so somebody in your college had some understanding of how this worked. They taught you, you're not self-taught, they taught you, but then to get together with this whole team and say, we're going to build a PC. Were you under contract to build it for Microsoft? Were you doing it for them?
No. This was an IBM project.
Okay.
IBM in the late 70s is the computer company. As the saying went at the time, no one ever got fired for buying an IBM computer.
Okay.
So IBM is the company supplying big mainframe computers to banks and major institutions. But our salesmen were going into these banks and seeing an Apple computer sitting on somebody's desk. And of course, you're the IBM salesman. I want to sell you something from IBM.
Yeah.
I don't want you to have this thing named for a fruit sitting on your desk.
All right.
So the powers that be said, figure out how IBM can do this. And I mentioned earlier the System 23 Data Master. That actually was our first attempt at doing something like this, but we kind of got wrapped up in the bureaucracy of IBM, and it's got to do all these things and work this way. And so it didn't quite work out. It was a nice commercial, low-end commercial machine, but it wasn't a personal computer. So the then CEO of IBM, Frank Carey, said, no, this isn't it. Go back and tell me how to do this. So in August of 1980, a group of people formed a task force, and I wasn't part of it, figured out okay, here's what we need to do. We need to create this. We're going to sell it in computer lands, in Sears business centers, and any other storefront that wants to do this. And it's going to be very personal. And we have to do it like the rest of the industry is doing. So we need to get the basic interpreter from Microsoft. So we went to Microsoft as a contractor.
Okay.
And also got the operating system from them. So it was an IBM product from the very beginning.
And it was operating, wasn't Windows then, right? It was before Windows?
It was an operating system that required you to type in every command that you wanted to do. You were just looking at a little prompt. And so if you wanted to run VisiCalc, which was the precursor to what is now Excel, you would actually have to put the VisiCalc disk into the diskette into the machine, because we didn't even have a hard drive back then. All you had were little diskettes. You'd have to put that into the machine, and then you'd have to type VisiCalc, VISACALC, and hit enter. And then the diskette would begin churning away, and it would load the VisiCalc program. You didn't get to click on anything. You had to use the little arrow keys and the numbers and letters on the keyboard. That's all you got.
That's barbaric from what it is today, huh? Wow. So,
well, yes, but compared to what you had before that existed, this is wonderful. This is something that's extremely powerful. It allows you to do things you never thought you could do before. So if you view it from 1975, it was almost magic. When you view it from 2026, it was, it was barely better than a paperweight.
So we've talked about this, and you ended up out in Washington were you bringing the PC that IBM created to Bill Gates for them to see how it worked? They weren't buying one. You just wanted to show them what you had before you put it on the market. Was that what that was about?
No.
No. I'm never right for this.
Yeah, that's okay. You're learning. You said you were doing this to learn.
You're right.
We built the hardware. That lump of iron and silicon that sits on your desk. We went to Microsoft to get the operating system, the basic interpreter, and, by the way, a game called Adventure, all the software that you want to run on the machine. We also went to a company to get VisiCalc, the very first spreadsheet program, and several others. So Microsoft was contracted to IBM to provide this for our machine. And the original operating system was logoed as IBM Disk Operating System. So I delivered the very first prototype machine. We had put one together, actually a couple of them. We put them together, got it to run. It was still very early and crude. I had not written all of the programs necessary to make everything work in the keyboard and the printer and the display and all that stuff. But our contract with Microsoft said we had to deliver something December 1st, 1980. So fly out to Bellevue, Washington, and turn it over to Bill Gates and Paul Allen. Pretty neat. Showed up at the door, knocked on the door. It's about 8 a.m. Monday morning. And Steve Ballmer's the guy who answers the door. He later on went to become the CEO. So I think he had an excellent career path there. He went from receptionist to CEO.
Is that really true? It was so small back then?
No. Steve was one of the founders of the
I knew that.
But the company was only about 30 to 40 people big at that time. It wasn't a behemoth that it is now.
Pioneers.
And they were all sort of just inside the doorway waiting for the doorbell to ring, so to speak. And so Ballmer's the guy who opened the door, but Bill Gates was right there, so forth.
Wow.
It was Pretty cool.
To me, just to hear about it is amazing. Now they were also were they software designers or the operating system? That was their thing, right? They weren't hardware builders, or they just supplied the operating system, correct?
Their piece de resistance was a basic interpreter, which is a tool that allows you to write your own programs in a fairly high level language so that you could create games or whatever it was you wanted to do. That's what their mark was in the personal computer industry. In a long story that I'm not going to tell, IBM had wanted to go to a different company for the operating system, but they couldn't quite make it work. So they came back and said, Bill, can you do anything? So Bill goes down the street to a guy he knows, Seattle Computer Products, and this guy's got an operating system and says, how about I license that from you with all sorts of, and so this guy got $50,000.
No.
And Bill Gates ended up with Microsoft operating system, which of course they had to do some work on to make it work with the IBM PC. So,
well, you told me once that Bill Gates did write code, right? He could if he had to.
Yeah, Bill wrote code for the machine. I always like to when I give my talk on how personal computers came to life, I always like to tease the fact that one of the last things that Bill Gates ever wrote for the IBM personal computer, and coincidentally, one of the last things that was ever written by Bill Gates that was part of a product, was a stupid little game called Donkey, where you had a car going up the road and you tried to miss the donkey every time you went by. But Bill was right there writing code. Once again, it was a very small company at that time.
Wow. Now,
they had.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
But no, I wanted to. I know your career. It was more than Control Alt Delete. Your career lifetime was with IBM. I can't find how the evolution went, but let's go in a whole different direction. If you were around for this, when they just kind of fell out of the PC market, and now they are monsters in large operating systems and all kinds of internal software programs. And again, tell me if I'm wrong, but that is their field, right? IBM is still heavily involved. They're just not in the PC market.
That is correct. They are no longer in the PC market. In fact, I don't think they were related. But I retired from IBM, and within a couple months, they sold the PC business to Lenovo. So Lenovo now carries on that. Like I said, don't think those are related, but
What were you doing? What were you doing after you were one of the groundbreaking people? That is not hyperbole in the PC business, creating it and fixing it and debugging it and all that good stuff that comes with it. Did you stay then? That was from then on. It was more evolved PCs or.
Oh yeah, yes. I was part of the original team. We then went on to create the next round. I personally worked on the Personal Computer XT. I managed a group of people that wrote the code for that and brought it up. Then I was the manager of what we called an architecture department, because we were now having many different variants of the IBM PC. Your listeners may remember there was the Personal Computer AT, which came out in 1984. Late in 84, there was the IBM PC Junior, a long, sad story. And then in 1987, there was the IBM PS2 family of personal computers, and then branching off into servers during the 90s. and more variants of desktop computers. And during that time, I was either managing people developing one of those products or running the architecture department. I managed that architect. I managed that architect. I can't speak. I managed that architecture department 4 different times. You know, they kept sending me back, said, "Well, he's got to be able to do it right this time."
All right, let me ask you this: since I know your career date when you retired, the microchip, right? The effect that was during your era when suddenly the computer processing power was greatly increased. With that, was that something you also managed as you were building these software programs and things like that?
We purchased the microprocessors from Intel, which at the time we did it was remarkable for IBM. Prior to that time, IBM built all of their processors, the IBM 360s and the System 7s and Series 1s, all that. Processor was designed and built by IBM. But big change, personal computer, we buy it from Intel. We get all the, buy those parts from them. So we worked very closely with Intel. And I was part of my job in the architecture area. What's Intel bringing out next? How can we utilize that? How do we put the system together to get the best performance at the lowest price?
People that listen to me, for all the conversations I've had, they know I always go off in a lot of crazy directions. But since this was your life, and I'm sure you still follow it, it's not controversial. But all that I read about the chips coming out of Taiwan, and we don't create them here. They don't build them here. These microprocessors, or whatever they're called, in the United States. Is that something that's based in truth, that we're dependent on basically countries outside the United States for that product?
Let me give you an analogy in a dead business, but you know how newspapers work, right? You have a bunch of reporters that write stories that then are edited by the editors, and then it gets sent off to linotype operators who would type these things in and form these big plates that would then go to the printing presses. And the printing presses would now churn out thousands of newspapers. Mm-hmm. The semiconductor industry is sort of that way. The reporters and editors and linotype operators are in the U.S. Those are the people at Intel and NVIDIA and other companies like that who are designing the chips. As an aside, my daughter is an electrical engineer, and she's doing that work. She's doing chip design.
Wow.
And she's located here in the United States. And then those plates that represent what's going to go in the newspaper, those go to Taiwan for the most part. Intel does some amount of manufacturing in the U.S. and other companies do, but the major amount of semiconductor manufacturing is done in Taiwan. TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, I think is what that stands for. So those are the guys churning out the chiclets, if you will, turning out the thousands. Now, if something were to happen in Taiwan, that would be a real problem. Just like if you really expected to get your newspaper every day and somebody invaded the printing press, you wouldn't get your paper.
Sure.
Same sort of thing.
And partly because these microprocessors also not just in your PC, they're in your automobile, they're in your airplanes, right? That's part of the reason it's such a serious situation. Am I correct with that for a change?
Oh, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
If you got a high-end toaster, there's a microprocessor inside that. You've got a key fob, right?
Yeah.
When you get off the ship and you actually go to drive a car, you got this little button that go beep beep and the car door opens. you got more processing power in your hand right there than it took to get the guys on Apollo 11 to the moon and back.
Wow.
Your computer in your hand is bigger than the one they had on the spaceship. So
is there a reason that, is it just labor costs that it was outsourced, that if they produce them or begin like they say they are in the United States, that'll bring costs up? Is that what keeps them from doing it? They're just cheap enough from Taiwan?
Boy, I couldn't tell you. I'm not sufficiently versed in that. I will tell you that creating the fabrication facility for semiconductors costs billions of dollars and requires very precision tools inside it. Right. Labor costs are not the greatest part of developing manufacturing semiconductors, those microprocessors. It's the incredible investment you have to make in the capital, the building and the room in which you're going to build these and the tools you use to build them. So
amazing. Let me back up to when you were part of that team and then running the team. Did you have situations where the sales department was screaming, we need this thing, we need this thing, we need to roll this out? Was there ever that outside pressure, or they just left you alone until because it was a trial and error, right? Let's try it this way, let's try it that way, and see what happens. You know how, like Fincantieri, I make fun of Fincantieri because they build a ship and it never seems to be ready when it's supposed to be ready because things happen. Did that happen in on your side where they're saying, hey, Dave, we need this thing?
It happens all the time.
Okay.
Whenever you decide how long it's going to take to do something, you're never right. Okay. It always goes too long. Now, there are ways you can solve those problems. When we did the original PC, our mandate was do it within a year. And amazingly, we did. But we were left alone, said, come up with what you think is best. And we did. But as we then extended the family, say, okay, we want to add this capability, we want to add this capability. It's going to take us this long. Sometimes it was a real push to get that done. Sometimes we did not get it done in time. Sometimes Microsoft was not ready in time.
Yeah.
We needed a new operating system to work with these new features. I got to tell you this story.
Okay. I love them.
When I worked on the XT, which was a follow-on to the IBM PC, it had a hard drive in it that required a new operating system. The system manager for the XT here in Boca Raton, Florida, was a very large Sicilian gentleman.
Oh, boy.
And he felt that the best way to get Bill Gates to deliver that operating system on time was to personally go out and visit him. So during 1983, he and I would get on an airplane every Tuesday night, fly to Seattle, Washington, meet with the Microsoft guys, and here is this big guy sitting across from Bill Gates, who at that time was maybe 140 pounds, soaking wet, and saying, you're going to get me DOS 2.0 when? And then we'd get on the plane, fly the red eye back, and then we'd go back to work. But so sometimes the way you manage the development gets a little more personal.
All right, let's go back now to, you're a young man growing up. Were you one that fixed the TV, built the radio? You chose this career of electrical engineering. Did you at the time decide it was going towards computers, or when you got into school, you decided that was the future?
Well, computers had always intrigued me, but as the prototypical engineer back in the day, I'd take things apart and sometimes manage to put them back together. I had the Erector set, I had the Legos, all those different things that you would play around with to build things. And I did all that kind of stuff in my electrical engineering career in college. Computers were very much a specialization. They weren't kind of baked into the curriculum the way they are now. But that's what interested me. By the time I went to graduate school at Purdue, I sought out a guy in the computer architecture area to be my major professor. And that's how I ended up working on computers, because it seemed like a nifty thing.
It is all wiring.
Of course, also with computers, there's...
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah, with computers, there's no gray area. It's either a 1 or a 0, right? You don't have to screw around with it. Well, maybe it's this, or maybe it's that. No, it's either a 1 or a 0. It's true or false.
Let me also, because this was your field for so long, and it's still what you track, I was recently told that artificial intelligence is a terrible drain on our electric grid because of the amount of power that these huge fields need in order to function. That many, things they do per minute. Is that statement correct?
Artificial intelligence, the creation of these large language models, requires a huge amount of input. Essentially, you're reading the Library of Congress works in order to do this, and then to distill it into the sort of information that you want to then spew out in response to your Chat GPT request. And so that's even more than Google does, as it trolls the internet to find all the search links that you might be interested in. That's more than NVIDIA does to create their graphics processors. This is just a huge amount of data that's coming in. You need a lot of memory. You need a lot of storage. You need vast amounts of processing power. And all these computers get warm, so you got to cool them off. So you have to pump in a bunch of power to run them, and then you have to pump in a bunch of power to cool them off so they don't get too hot when they're running. So
it
yes,
does.
They use a lot of power.
I have a neighbor. His son goes to a college in Florida. He's a very bright young man, and he doesn't use AI because he's also concerned about the environment and all the other good things. And I said, you're 20 years old. Go have a beer and relax. But he said to me, I don't use AI because of what it's going to do. So that I was curious whether he was just programmed by the Polytechnic college that he goes to, but it sounds like it uses a lot of power.
It does. And I'm afraid that's just going to be a fact of life, at least here for the beginning.
When you started building the PC-1, this is a dumb question, but did you ever envision, I get these New Year's cards and Thanksgiving cards, and they're amazing. When you open them up with all the things that are happening with music and characters and all of that, from when when you started with, it was basic. Like you said, the donkey game. Did you see it? And where do you think it's going? I mean, are you worried about AI in terms of, well, you listen sometimes to my podcast. My computer voice is getting better at these readings, and sometimes it makes me a little nervous. Where do you think it's going?
Well, first of all, I like Reese. So, yes, that's a...
There you go. Anyway, but do you think it's... is it... Are we going towards a doomsday situation? Is that possible?
Well, I'm going to... It's hard to predict the future.
Okay.
And I'm very poor at it. Okay. So with that as a caveat, we have said it's doomsday with every new thing that comes along.
Okay.
That TV is going to wreck the world. Our children are going to be sitting in front of the TV all the time. They're not going to learn. They're not going to be able to read. And then computers come along. Well, that's going to ruin them. Then the internet comes along. And after that brief flush of, oh, this is going to be great, no, it's going to ruin the kids. They're spending all their time on social media, smartphone. Now it just amplifies that. And yet we've lived through all of that.
Yes, we have.
My guess is that AI will become part of the fabric. It's not something that just took off last year. It's been going on for quite some time. If you think about 10 years ago, Google was filling in the rest of your search term as you started typing it in. That was a simplified form of artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just going to get better, and we'll learn how to live with it, how to deal with it. It'll be a transition, but we've gone through all the other steps. And I don't see why this won't.
And it's very helpful in medical field, and it's doing a lot of good, and it's very helpful to me with Reese. One more, and we'll let you go. And thank you. This was fantastic. Are we ahead of China, behind China, in terms of, emerging technologies? There's always that stereotype, whatever you want to call it. We invented it and they borrow it. But is that a concern in the world? I know you still follow the whole computer industry. Is that a problem? You think we're ahead or behind?
I couldn't tell you. I'm not someone who follows China and the rest of the world like that. What I can point out is that China is educating a lot of engineers and scientists. As close as I can tell, China believes in science and will continue to work in that regard. I think the United States is going through a period where we don't trust science. We're afraid of its implications. And that's going to allow China to gain ground on the U.S. Whether they're ahead right now, I couldn't tell you, but I'm concerned about those trend lines that we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot here.
Well, that's why I asked it, because, you know how I do a podcast and I say stuff, and sometimes I know what I'm talking about. When it comes to this business, you know what you're talking about. I can't thank you enough for this. You're a great guest, by the way. I mean, I really, the information was wonderful, and your history and your background. And when I've known you for quite a while, but I didn't know you were that guy. You were that control-alt-delete guy. I tell people on the street, you know who I met? So that's the coolest thing in the world. Seriously. I mean, what would it have been otherwise? They didn't even offer suggestions. They said, okay, we'll go with that. I looked down on my new, the keyboard now. What else could they have put in there? But we all know what it does. And I always say to myself, how come I have to stretch it out so far? Now I know, so I don't hit the wrong keys. So I want to thank you, Dr. David Bradley, a longtime loyal Oceana guest, by the way, and the lovely wife, Cynthia. But I appreciate your time, and I'm sure the listeners are really going to enjoy it.
It's been my pleasure, Tom.
And it would. All right, sir. You have a great day. Go back in the sunshine.
Thank you, Tom.
I'll talk to you soon. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll see you later. Bye.